Hi, everybody. Before we get into this week's episode about Severance, I just wanted to give everyone a little update. As many of you know, a lot of the Nerdist team lives and works in LA. Our offices are in Burbank. And we just wanted to let everybody know concerning the fires in LA that everybody on our direct team currently is safe and sound. Still kind of waiting for the winds to die down to see if hopefully the fires don't spread elsewhere. In our kind of larger Legendary team, those possibly know that we're a subsidiary of Legendary Entertainment. A lot of people actually in the greater Legendary family are at least evacuated. Some of them have in fact lost their homes. So yeah, it's a really scary time, but we obviously don't want to make light of that. We just wanted everybody to know that, the episode you're about to hear is silly and it gets into the weeds about Severance, but I just wanted everybody to know that I'm okay. We're okay for the most part. But a lot of people aren't. So we wanted to kind of highlight some places that if you're interested in donating, if you are able to donate, that would be really wonderful. I'll put links in the show notes for everybody, but some places we want to highlight include World Central Kitchen, who are giving food to families and first responders. Pasadena Humane Society, there's a lot of animals that are displaced or stuck in places when their families have had to evacuate. There's the LA Food Bank. And there's also a link that I'll put in the show notes for just a whole directory of on-the-ground initiatives through Mutual Aid Los Angeles. So, like I said, I'll put links in the show notes. The easiest URL to read out is the LA Food Bank, which is just lafoodbank.org/fire. All of these places I think are worth checking out. So thanks very much. Hope you are all doing well in this new year. It's only been 15 days in 2025 and it's already pretty terrible. But yeah, so thank you all. Hope you enjoy Mikey and I talking very, very in-depth and nerdy about Severance. And yeah, thanks very much. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Laser Focus, the deep dive pop culture podcast from Nerdist. My name is Kyle Anderson. Thank you for listening. Folks, this week we are going to be talking about Severance Season 1. And since Severance Season 1 aired 3 years ago, we are going to get hella into spoilers because Season 2 premieres, if you're listening to this the day it drops tomorrow, this week's January 17th. So we wanted to get into some of the theories and stuff like that. If you didn't get to watch Season 1 or if you don't have time to rewatch it before Season 2, go to our YouTube. I did a video with Adam Murray about just a quick 25 minutes, like recap of the entire season, all the big major things. And it's not even everything, but a lot of the major beats. But this is going to be a spoiler-filled podcast. We're going to talk about theories. We're going to talk about weird stuff. We're going to talk about questions that need answering or we would like answered. And kind of break all that stuff down. And to do that is somebody who is the best I know at getting into a thing quickly and deeply. That sounds gross, but it's not. Who as of like prior to Christmas had never watched Severance and is now like theory spouting machine, which is my favorite thing about him. Welcome back to the show. Happy New Year, Michael Walsh. Hey, buddy.
Thank you. I'm not going to touch any of that intro, though. It's a family-friendly show. At least we
of course.
pretend it is. I will say, if you're worried about spoilers, just listen to this as your outie. There you go.
You know, what I mean? Sever yourself, and you'll be fine.
Go. Boom. All set.
Yeah. Working on the video was very helpful because there was a lot of stuff that even though this is a sidebar. I have a very good memory for media for some reason. Like people are always, and my wife especially is always just like, what happened? And I'm like, I think I remember almost everything that happened. And I remember the big beats, but the little things go away or I don't hang on to them. So revisiting it, Season 1 quickly in order to make that video was really helpful. And also kind of just filled me with like all this stuff in my brain, questions and stuff like that. And I know we only have a week or so. Screeners went out for people who work in the industry, but Mikey and I both have not watched them yet because we wanted to get all of our season 1 thoughts out first.
Yes, this is pure. We are not in. We have not seen anything from season 2. So if we predict something or theorize something and it turns out to be correct, we were just good at what we were doing. Yeah. We have no foreknowledge.
We have no foreknowledge at all. We wanted to make sure we did this first before we watched anything. And we're kind of going to just watch along with you, even though we have access. This is weird.
Who cares? No. You know what? I actually do think this is good because we will, as we're going to do weekly coverage of the show, we will watch weekly. We will not. Critics got 6 episodes. The reviews that you might see out there are based on people watching those 6 episodes. We will be watching 1 episode a week so that we can write about this show with the same amount of knowledge that you have. That way we are not giving stuff away, even accidentally.
We are the proletariat. We are the other thing. The hoi polloi. We are whatever. Who cares?
People of the people.
We are the people of the people. So yeah, let's really get into it. That is maybe one of the craziest cliffhangers I've ever seen in a show, especially one that at the time we didn't realize was going to take 3 years to come back. But like I say this in the video, but like we've had 3 years of She's Alive ringing in our brains. like what happens next? Like there's that whole thing. And we've seen, there are trailers out which we have watched. And so it's fairly indicative that the 4 outies or innies that got out are allowed to go back to work, maybe forced to go back to work. Who knows? But it's also fairly certain that the press, which is apparently still free, even though everything else in Kier is completely owned by Lumon, it is very like they're talking about the 4 of them as like freedom fighters, like whistleblowers and stuff like that, which I think is really interesting because like Lumon sort of has to get public opinion on its side, which is the whole point of Helena Egan doing that to herself in the first place. And she's the one who basically is like, this sucks. I don't want to do this. Yeah. So let's go through. So Mikey wrote a whole piece about questions that need answering. If you can read on Nerdist.com. But basically, let's go through some of those things and talk about why they're important to you, especially as somebody who just got to the show like relatively soon.
Yeah. Oh my God. When the season ended, when I got to the end of the season, I was like, people have been sitting on this for 3 years. I would have lost my mind. And then I remember that Jon Snow in the books has been dead for well over a decade at this point, so it's fine.
Yeah. Man, he's still dead in the books?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
So
that's old hat at this point.
He never made dead too, so.
Yeah, that's never happening. He's never releasing those books. At some point, manuscripts will surface and you'll be like, why are you writing about this character? He's like, I want to make sure everyone who's ever had a name in Westeros has an entire chapter.
I just hope my innie has no idea of what's going on there.
Wouldn't that be nice?
So anyway, Lumon soap, huh?
Lumon, yeah. Okay, so let's talk about Lumon soap because I don't know what the hell you're talking about with the soap. So here's the order of events. You watched the season, you came up with your list, then I watched it again in quick succession in order to make the video. So I did not remember anything about the soap stuff, and that was your number one question, or the first question you asked, I guess, in your piece.
Yeah.
So what's the deal with the soap?
So the one thing I think with Severance is there is nothing that is too small on this show. Even something that's mentioned one time could end up having huge ramifications later on. And kind of going through the season, I think some of those small things are easy to just think like, oh, it's just kind of world building or weird. By the end of season 1, I don't think anything is simply world building. I think everything is relevant to the plot and to the events and the mystery, and that includes the soap. So Lumon Industries starts as a topical salve company. The original logo, it's a flask and a spoon and a drop. In fact, you can kind of see how it evolved into the more modern, awful one. But there's also this weird moment where Irv gets very concerned about the soap. He's like, everything else is labeled. Maybe we should label the soap. There's also the bad soap that they use in the break room. employees have to wash their hands 10 times a day with this specific soap. And it's like the first task the manager has. It's very, very important. And it goes all the way back to the founding of the company. In fact, Kier Egan's wife, Imogen, right? Imogen,
Mhm.
she was a swab girl. They named that soap store that Miss Selving pretends she works at is named Swab Girl. There's just a lot of stuff going on around the soap. And why is it so important for the employees to be using this stuff 10 times a day? Yes, he cared about hygiene, but at some point, even then, right, you almost make it so you're immune to the soap, right? Like,
Yeah.
so what is it really doing? This is I think going to end up being a question that is going to be so important to understanding everything. What is so important about this stuff that they have to put in their hands every day?
That kind of there's a lot of stuff about Kier specifically. So he founded this company, and you know the big central metaphor of Severance is that like, it, I mean, there are many central metaphors, but concerning Lumen, it's sort of like, what if a corporation was the same as a religion, basically. And so a lot of that stuff, you know, and you can look at the line of succession of Lumen CEOs, they're all in the Egan family. And um, part of me wonders if it's like the employee handbook is the same as like their, you know, for lack of a better term, like Book of Mormon or something like that, where it's basically just like it's interpretations of whatever. It's something somebody cared about way back in the 1800s has now become like literally gospel. And so part of me with a lot of that stuff concerning, you know, Kier's teachings, it's sort of like, well, there must have been a reason way back when for that to have been an issue. And maybe he was just a neat freak, you know, like, or a clean freak. And he just decided that, you know, everybody needed to wash their hands a bunch. And that became, you know, this, we hear a lot in the season about, you know, there are rules that are spoken like they're the 10 commandments, like they're written that way and they're kind of treated that way. And so I agree that obviously the soap has importance in the grand history of Lumen, but I'm not entirely sure what is currently important versus what has just become lore. Do you know what I mean? Or religious teaching kind of thing.
Yeah, it it got such a specific focus without being a major focus of the season that I can't shake the feeling that there is something sinister to this specific soap. And the
Mm,
fact that they whatever they're using in the break room is also called the bad soap.
right.
I also feeds into these employees that the good soap is good for them, so they'll
Right.
keep using it. They won't question it. And one theory that's out there that a lot of people like that I think has some merit is that it might be something that sort of makes them more compliant.
Hmm.
You know, keeps them in line. And you know, if that gets back to it, I just think that every single thing we learn about Kier is very, very important,
Hmm.
and that it's all going to factor into the fact that he started this company as a topical salve company, and then the show focuses on soap so much.
Yeah.
Um, eh, you know, and it, it could be a lot of different things. I just think ultimately, whatever it is sinister.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's only terrible. Like it's definitely like everything. There's so much of that is like, especially on rewatch, going like, this is awful. Like I know this is a sci-fi series, a kind of speculative fiction series, but just the very fact that like this company is doing this to people and basically treating them like children who are, you know, like, you better do this or you're gonna, and then they actually torture people, and it's just it's madness. And it's like, well, we'll never get in trouble because these people will never get out, and so they'll never know. And that's obviously like the big climax of the season, is them being like, no, it's actually very bad, um what's going on in there. And we still don't 100% know, other than just it's um convenient or whatever, and they can, we don't 100% know why they're doing it, like what the purpose of Lumen is as a company, other than just, you know, which gets into bigger questions, but like, what is the purpose of macro data refinement? We have absolutely no idea what are what and how many other departments are there. We know that there's O&D, and we know that there's at least 2 other. We don't know what the goats. We'll get into the goats. Don't worry about it. We'll talk about the goats. But so it's such a huge facility, and almost all of it is off limits to anybody. So it's like, what are in those big rooms where there's just giant hallways? There must be something in there, and I'm assuming it, like, the different elevators are like, only one elevator leads to one department or one wing or whatever like that. So I don't know. It's a lot of. I would love to find like well, it's against the
Yeah.
rules, but I would love
Yeah,
to find a
can't make
map. You
Can't make a map.
Um, yeah. Okay. So the soap is, I did not remember anything about the soap, but I do think the soap is really interesting. Do you want to talk about the map next, or do you want to talk about
Yeah,
Earth
because
next?
you just talked about the departments too. Like,
Yeah.
so I think by season's end, Irv is the most interesting character,
Mm,
and he's got a very interesting story throughout the season, but it's a very human story, right? But then at the end, we find out, oh no, there's Audi Irv is like the most interesting guy going on here. What is happening? He's painting these pictures of the other the testing floor door, which we
mhm.
only barely see. It's where they send off Miss Casey, who we're going to get into, and you know what is going on with Irv? Why does he have this chest, this hidden locked up chest with a map to other severed employees? These anti-Lumen stories. Why does he say he's worked there for 3 years, but his company badge says 9 years?
Yeah.
Right? Like he is. There's questions: is he a mole? Is he a spy? I think the better questions is, how many times has he been severed?
Yeah.
What's his past with Bert? Did he have a romantic relationship with Bert before, so they had to be splintered off? Is that why they forced Bert into retirement when these two reconnect?
Mhm.
I think I said this before we started. We could do an entire podcast on Irv. There are so many great questions about him, and the best part is they got a world class actor, one of my favorites,
Yeah.
playing this character. And what I find stunning about his performance, I know this isn't relevant to the theories, but I just have to say this. What I find stunning about John Turturro's performance is that it might be the best of his career, which
Yeah.
it seems impossible when
Yeah.
you look at some of his performances and how good he's been for how, I mean, what are we talking? At least 30 years now, 40 years
40
of
probably, I think. Yeah.
great performances. And this is, to me, so you've got the most interesting character being played by an incredible actor doing the best work of his life, who also then gets to share the screen with Christopher Walken, who this has got to be my favorite Christopher Walken performance in a long time.
Yeah.
Um,
It,
it's so good, and it's so captivating. The stuff with, like, Irv loves the paintings, right? He's obsessed with these paintings, and then we find out he is a painter,
right.
and then and he's worked there longer than he says. Is Irv the one painting these?
Mm,
Right? Did Irv paint all of these paintings that he now loves? It, there's so much going on with him. I can't even believe that in the last just 2 episodes, really, right? Because it's really just like the last. In fact, it's kind of it's the last 1 or 2, right? That we just learn all of this stuff about Audi
yeah.
Irv.
In episode 8, which is the penultimate episode, it opens with what Irv does outside of work.
Yeah,
And up to that point, we've never known. But the end of 7, I believe, oh gosh, I'll have to look at my notes, but is when Bert, he goes and finds that Bert is retiring. Yeah, because that's the
let's
the
burn
dance.
this. Let's burn this place down.
Let's burn this place down. And so it's very much like, because at the beginning of the season, Irv is the most by the book, like, we are going to, the word is law, basically. He's the one who suggests they go to the perpetuity wing so that Helly can feel the importance of the work and all this stuff. Which obviously
He's a
doesn't
true
work, but
believer. Any Irv is a true
he's a
believer for the
true,
first
true believer.
2/3 of the season.
And because of Bert, at least in this iteration of his brain, I think it is fairly certain at this point that we can assume that he has been wiped, or at least his innie has been wiped a few times.
How does he know about the testing floor at all?
Exactly.
You
Like,
know?
what is the testing floor, and how does he know about going there? we only know about the testing floor, and that's one of the genius things about the direction of the show. We really need to point out, Adams, God, he's the actor. Ben Stiller directed the first three and the last three, and then Aoife McAuliffe did the middle three, and every single one of those episodes is so perfectly directed. And I just love the fact that at the beginning of episode 8, we see what Irv is painting, and we know from earlier in the season that he has these like hallucinations. He's dozing off at work, and he's having these weird dreams of paint, this black paint kind of oozing up out of him. And it sure seems to me like he is trying to keep himself awake at nighttime when he's outie, so that his mind kind of like wavers when he's at work, at possibly to remember stuff. Who knows? But then at the end of that episode, Miss Casey goes down that hallway, and it's like, okay, so Irv, at the very least, Irv knows about this. I just find it so interesting, and like, Irv becomes like my favorite character, absolutely. And it's like, I never thought in my wildest dreams that a show would, or anything would, depict a romance between John Turturro and Christopher Walken, and I would be so invested in it. And it's not a joke. It's not funny.
So sincere. It's
not
human.
like, look at these two weirdos. Like, it's not that at all. It's the sweetest and most like, they're both very like austere people, and it feels like, I don't know.
Gentle. It's gentle.
Absolutely. Which is why it's such a big when Irv goes off on Milchick when he finds out that Bert is retiring, and he's just like, so that's it. I just, you're killing him basically, which is basically what it is. If you're never an innie again, like, that part of you is dead. And that's a part of like, sort of like the Blade Runner thing of like, what constitutes a person, you know what I mean? And there's been that with like robots. There's been that with like time travel splinters, like in, parallel dimensions and stuff like that. Like, is this a real person? Do they have the right to exist? Like, that kind of thing. And this is the first time it's ever been just your memories. Like, your memories are you. And if you get rid of those, then, what more do you have? But yeah, Irv is a number one in my book. Like, he's so good.
There's one more thing too we didn't even talk about, right? Please. Like, in terms of has he been severed multiple times? He knows stuff about Lumon that he shouldn't, right? He should not know about the testing floor. So what does he do? He not only paints the testing floor over and over and over again, he keeps himself up.
Yeah.
So that his innie will doze off at work. And what does his innie see? The black paint, which we think is goo for most of the season, right? But now we know it's like the black paint that he's using over and over again. It's getting under his fingernails. Is he trying to communicate with his innie? And if he is, that tells us something about this process, either Severance himself or reintegration that Petey underwent. He thinks it's possible to communicate with himself if he can do it through dreams or repetition or something like that. It's so well crafted as a story and a mystery, and I think this is the show. This show understands how to use mystery in a way a lot of shows fail, and also shows that you can trust your audience to not give them everything.
Yeah.
You can just give them, it's okay for your audience not to know. I'm going to praise the show a lot. I haven't reacted to a show like this very often in the last, I would say 5 to 6 years. I feel like a lot of attempts at doing this type of story have failed, and this one is one of the best ever.
Yeah. I don't want to like contrast like vastly different types of shows and everything like that, but like, the first season of Yellow Jackets was sort of like, ooh, what's going on here? Like, was what's mystical and what's whatever. And by the second season, I was just like, oh, I don't care. This is bad. And like the mystery doesn't matter, like that kind of thing. Sorry to people who love Yellow Jackets.
True Detective is up and down with that, right? Like, True Detective has delivered a couple of awesome seasons like this, and a couple where it's like, do you guys make this up as you went along? Like,
yeah,
did you forget? I think it's like season 2, like the ultimate killers, or we meet them one time, or so. It's just weird.
Yeah, it's not, and there's no sort of dread, and I think that's a huge thing about Severance that I love, is that it's like, I've spoken about here and elsewhere that like, as I've gotten older, and especially as the world has gotten the way it is, like cosmic horror is the true kind of horror to me. And that's not just big tentacle creatures. It's literally like the world doesn't care about you. And that could not matter more than in Severance, where like everything is out to get these people. And like the fact that they, Mark lives in Lumon subsidized housing, and as far as he knows, there's really nobody else who lives there besides him and Mrs. Something. Like there's this whole neighborhood and nobody lives there.
And yet they still don't have enough room for their garbage and recycling.
Yeah, and it's weird stuff like that where you just kind of, if you're not paying attention or if you're not really thinking about it too much, you just kind of get on with it. But like from the outside, I think that scene in the first episode where he goes to the dinner party at his sister and Rickon's house, where the people are just asking questions and kind of have their own, expectations of why and what people would do if they were severed. I think that's a really important scene, especially in the first episode, because it sets up not only who Adam Scott's character Mark is and why he would do this kind of thing, and sort of why he's so kind of, I think he knows that it's not good, and yet he did it anyway because he's in so much grief. But that the stigma of like, what is actually going on? And it's like, you just kind of have to go along to get along kind of thing. Like, it's just my job. Like, I find that really, workaday people kind of just putting their head down and doing stuff so that they don't get fired, like is so relatable. Even though like, who everyone who worked for Enron, let's say, that's a very old reference, but like not everyone who worked there is evil. You know what I mean? Like, so, but just most of them. I don't know. I know nothing about that. That's literally a 25-year-old reference. What am I talking about?
I think it's fine. I think it's fine.
All right,
it's fine. Yeah, I think people know. Okay. I want to we'll get to Miss Casey next, but I want to talk about the paintings, because the paintings really stood out to me again so the only people who know each other, as far as we know, macrodata refinement and optics and design. These are two who should have nothing to do with each other. Optics and design the cards, like weird, and the tote bags for the handbook, and they hang up the paintings, which are not done by them. And yet there is this deep-seated hatred between the two teams, departments, and there is no reason why, other than these paintings that depict awful, like, uprisings. I mean, there's the legend, right? The coup,
right?
The grim barbarity of optics and design.
Right. The grim barbarity of optics and design, and the macrodata refinement. What's the word? Travesty or something like that. I'll look it up real fast.
Well, no, this is good that you brought this up, because this actually also ties into Irv, right? If he's been there for 9 years and there are these two separate paintings that maybe he painted, if there was some sort of uprising from either department, was Irv not only there, was he a part of it? Right? And the things about these two sister paintings.
Sorry, please.
Calamity. The thing about these two sister paintings too, these offices are huge.
Yeah, so big.
Now, they put them together, right? It's a form of control. It's unease. It also adds to the atmosphere of the show, which I really take as sci-fi horror, right?
It's tremendous.
The horror show, right? Is it possible that these offices weren't always so empty, that we really did have some sort of slaughter? And the funny thing too, right? They don't want these departments to kind of meet, which seems like it should be really easy to make sure it doesn't happen. But then when it does happen, they let Irv accidentally see this painting so that, Dylan is like, see, I told you we can't trust these guys. Like, they want to keep them apart, but they also want to keep them on their toes. They want them to never know what's going on. It's all a form of control. And I think I'm gonna plant my flag in that there actually was an interdepartment incident of violence. I think we're gonna find out it really did happen.
I don't know. See, I think that's like, Milchick comes in right as Mark is trying to unite the two departments. I think it's literally just, what if we sow fear and distrust between the two departments that are on the same floor ostensibly, so that they don't interact. And because the more people who talk, the easier it will be to uprise. I think there was an uprising, but I don't think it was against each other. I think it was against the board or the company.
The problem is we don't know what anybody's doing.
Yeah.
You know, like maybe there was a very good reason for optics and design to attack macro data refinement or vice versa. We don't really know what's going on. But look, there was either a violent coup or there wasn't, and I'm planting my flag on the violent coup just because I think the size of these the physical size of departments. In fact, I think the optics and design department is more revealing because they all have those big machines.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like it's one thing to be like, here's a big room with the 4 desks. We need 4 refiners. Why do we need all those machines? You know, it's not like refinement has 15 unused computers,
Right.
but optics and design has all of those unused machines doing whatever weird thing they're doing. They have no idea really what their tasks are either. So I think the physical size of the rooms is also giving us information beyond just setting the atmosphere for this creepy, unnatural place.
Yeah, and it's like especially macro data refinement, like that room is so big, like it's a conference room in a hotel or something like that. If you're or like a ballroom,
Yeah.
like it's huge, but the ceiling is really low. It's really wide, and they all just sit in a square of just the 4 things, and there's the kitchenette and the bathroom and like the closet, basically with all the supplies in it. And that's the only thing that's in that entire room. And I think it's to make them feel small when
Mhm.
compared to the giantness of Lumen. And the fact that Milchick is always there. Like, she just pops in all the time. To make you kind of realize, like, oh, okay, they're just, and then they eventually find out actually that they're being watched at every minute of the day. When Cobell, and I just want to point out, in the video I call her Cobel the whole time because I just forgot the way that they all pronounce it. I was like, I think it's Cobel, and it's not. It's Cobell. Who cares? I care. That's what I tell you. But where she's just like, we saw you and Helly talk about this. What did you show her in this room? Why were you in another department that has stuff? Like, it's an unused department. Like, should they go into this room that has desks that are covered with tarps so that nobody goes in there? What was that? What was that
Mhm.
for? Who were those people? Like, it's all just designed to keep people going, like, oh, there is, the work is mysterious and important. That's all they need to know. Like, because they don't need to know what it is for. All they need to know is that they don't need to understand it, and it's important. But no one knows what it is. Everyone just takes for granted that Lumen is a conglomerate sort of company. Nobody actually knows what they do, and I think that's really, that's part and parcel to the mystery and also the horror of the whole thing. It's like, what is it? Like, what if Kier is like some eldritch god? Like, I think that would be a bit silly, but also, like, I don't 100% think that that's out of the realm of possibility.
We're gonna get into our Kier and Lumen,
Okay.
like Egan family theories, but don't worry.
Yeah.
I'm willing to go anywhere with
Great.
this.
Let's do it.
But yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about Miss Casey, who is obviously, that was the huge revelation in episode 7, I want to say, where we find out that Gemma, who is Mark's wife, who died in a car crash before the season began, and that's why he decided to join Lumen and go to the Severed Floor, is actually Ms. Casey, who is the counselor, who gives people the wellness checks and everything like that. And we also know in her last episode, before she gets put into the testing floor, that her life has been 107 hours, and that's all. She has no outie, as far as we know. She gets put in a closet and is asleep. She's not even there the entire day. Like, it's only when they need her they wake her up. The fact that she knows how long she's been alive is bananas. And she understands that she is weird. She tells that to Mark. She's like, I know I'm strange, but thank you for being good, I guess. I don't know, like,
just being nice to me.
yeah. I mean, it's so tragic. So what we don't know is why. Why did this happen? Why her? Um, the Mrs. Selvig of it all is really, or Harmony Cobell is really fascinating because she is clearly operating on a different level entirely than what Lumen is aware of. Um, but she clearly is trying to get Mark to remember her. Like, if he's ever going to remember anybody, it's going to be her. And I don't understand yet. I'm sure we will. Why that is the case? Because in their very last wellness check before she gets put away, she's sitting there looking, and she's like, they almost seem like they might recognize each other, and then they don't, and then she goes, take her to the testing floor. Like, she's upset that they don't recognize each other. But why would she want that to happen? This is all the things that I don't know.
Okay.
But Miss Casey ends up being the kind of focal point for that side of the mystery of, like, what do they do with everybody else who's been severed? Why are they taking supposedly dead people and making them innies that nobody knows is there? That kind of thing.
Okay, Kyle, during this section, I will need you to react to all of my comments with an equal amount of enthusiasm, showing no favor for any. Okay.
Okay.
So the first question that we need resolved that's going to tell us a lot: did Lumen fake her death, or did she actually die? And then Lumen took advantage of it. And Lumen, Mark's sister says, we can't go to the police. Lumen's got its fingers and everything, right? If anybody's can fake a death, it's Lumen. But the thing that really stands out is that Mark, Devin, and Rickon, there is no doubt in their mind she died. Like, there is no question to them that they died, and it's not even like there's no even hint that she didn't from them. Like, we never even were able to see the body, or she was mangled, or nothing like that. This is three people who loved her who were convinced she died. So, considering we're talking about Lumen and this weird company, I think, once again, I'm going to say I actually do think she died in that car crash. And I think that gets to why she's so weird. I think that Gemma was woken up and really doesn't have an outie because she's dead. And it's a workplace show and it's mystery and stuff, but this is also sci-fi, right? They're putting a chip in someone's head and severing them into two different people entirely. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they were able to, bring somebody back from the dead, even if it's in this form. And the fact that Miss Casey herself says, I know I'm strange, and she's barely alive, only 107 hours. The other people get woken up. They're still like people, right? Like Helly R wakes up, and we're basically seeing the birth of a fully grown person, but she's still normal, right? Like she's a totally normal person. Dylan's this foul-mouthed, funny person who's like, it's exactly somebody you might expect to be in the office that everybody likes, even though he's a little bit much at times, right? Like,
Yeah.
these are real people. And Miss Casey is really not a person. She is like an approximation of a person who only knows her job.
Right.
So, and this is the stuff that gets to, and then, did Mark go to them grieving and they were like, oh, this is an interesting little experiment, or did
Sure.
they target him because they had her? Again, maybe they did fake her death, and maybe this is all part of the master plan. There was no, or they were adapting, but the stuff with Miss Casey gets to what I think is the most fun stuff. And that's the Egan family in the board. This is, I think the questions about Miss Casey, while they are very interesting for the characters, right? Like, what's going to happen to Mark? What did happen to her?
Right.
I think that whatever is going on with her is directly tied to the mysterious unseen board, of which we only ever hear one word, the word yes. And you're talking about Kier, and you're talking about cosmic horror. I think it's time to really like pull the Band-Aid off of this and get into whatever the hell is going on with the Egan family. Just how weird is it? Are we talking about people who are not only looking for world domination, but are looking for the number one thing, I think the number one wish of all supervillains, eternal life?
Yeah.
And like I said, this is sci-fi. They can put a chip in your brain to sever you into two totally different human beings. What if we find out that when Kier Egan died, they preserved his brain?
Mm.
What if this is, because I do think there are limits, even though I'm up for anything on the show, I do think there are limits to what we can, like, I don't think we're going to find out a guy who was living in 1870 is necessarily still alive because they magically found something, 1900 or something but did they preserve his brain and then tap into it? Were they able to take, whatever he was and put it in the next CEO? There's this thing,
Yeah.
there's this thing where Helen is talking to her father, James, and he says to her, you're going to be with me at the revolving. Well, what's the revolving?
Yeah.
Like, if it was, we know because of the show, it's obviously not a simple you take over a CEI or even just I die. The revolving. Why are there all of these statues of the former CEOs at the same time we never see the board? Well, who is the Egan family trusting to be the board and make these decisions? I think this is where everything is going to tie into, which is that all of this for Lumon is about the Egan family and that none of them are really dead the way we think they're dead. That they're all alive in some capacity or conscious in some capacity, which what's the mysterious and important work, Kyle? What if these people are digitized?
Yeah.
Right? These random numbers that the refiners are putting into these little buckets, which also each have little notes for the four tempers, right? Care Egan's
Mhm.
four tempers. What they have, these random numbers evoke feelings in the people who see them. Why would they evoke feelings? That's a human thing, not a random number thing, and not a computer is going to have feelings. I think that this is where everything is coming into. Whatever is going on with the board is tied to the Egan family, is tied to the revolving, is tied to Miss Casey, is tied to micro data refinement, is tied to the goats. I think this is where it all comes in the central hub.
Very much so. And the goats is a good thing to bring up, not least because it's one of the weirdest moments of the season, and I love it. And the man pleading, they're not ready.
They're not ready.
Don't take them. They're not ready.
It's not time.
It's not time. So they're clearly doing something. They've figured out a way to split brains, or at least consciousnesses. Let's say it's physically a brain, but it's practically consciousnesses. I do think that it must be something about taking the essence, if not the actual, brain of Kier and putting it into the next CEO. I think that's fairly, given how weird James Egan is.
Weird.
Like that one scene of him is like, what is this? And like, and it's the perpetuity wing. Which means that it's never ending. Do you know what I mean? So it's like,
yes, in perpetuity.
in perpetuity.
Of all the things to call that wing, right? It's not even like the founders wing or the CEO wing or the Egan wing. The perpetuity wing is a very specific word choice there.
Yeah, and that's very much the everlasting. Yeah, exactly. Like it is about eternal life, and the fact that he is a messianic figure, I think, is a huge part of it as well. Or they try to portray him as such. When I love the moment when they reach their macro data refinement quota, and there's that weird like 8-bit kind of cartoon of Kier saying thank you and then flying away,
like as though you just threw a strike at the old bowling alley in
yeah.
town.
Yeah, exactly. And uh, it's laughable how like ridiculously they treat Kier, the legacy of Kier, and the fact that we see in her house, Cobell like worships literally at an altar of Kier. Like she must be some kind of like offshoot sect of religious zealot or something like that. That's kind of where I see her at, where like she is doing something that the board doesn't know about, but it's actually worse than what the board is doing, because the board is acting kind of unilaterally, where she is just kind of going, I can do whatever I want. Nobody knows what I'm doing. Doesn't tell the board everything, all this stuff. Which does lead us to like a slightly similar tangent to like, okay, you can raise the dead, let's say, or you can bring dead people back to life, or you can clone them. That's another thing. Like sheep are sort of it's goats, but like, Dolly the sheep was the first cloned being.
Yeah, if instead of goats, if it were sheep, I think it would be way too on the nose.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm glad they
and it
didn't
would
do
be
that.
too obvious. But it's hard not to think about Dolly.
Yeah.
When you just see in a room of like these little goats.
Yeah. Which I think is a question you brought up, like, is Seth Milchick cloned? He seems to be
Oh, you want
everywhere.
to get into this?
I do want to get into it. Is
Oh,
he a
all right.
clone? Who is he?
Okay.
He's not severed. We know that. He is, for all intents and purposes, only a Lumon employee,
Yes, not severed.
not severed.
This is I'm not taking credit for this. This is not even something I necessarily came up with on my own. I did while watching be like, man, Milchick does a lot. And while I try to avoid other theories just so they don't influence me, I came across this one. I love it so much. The multiple Seth Milchick theory.
Yeah.
That there is more than one of him. And there are some, I think I linked to it in the piece. Someone had a great breakdown on Reddit. But, there's like when they put the new door in, right? And he's checking
Mhm.
it. There are some very deliberate editing choices there to show him on each side of the door and then to show him mirrored. But the big thing is, this is a huge floor with multiple departments. And only one person seems to be in charge of anything, right?
Yeah.
Cobell
We never see anybody else.
Yeah, Cobell just sits in her office, right?
Yeah.
So how is Milchick doing all of this, especially when we know there are days where he's in the break room torturing somebody nonstop, right? He's in that break room for a day and a half. So who's doing all the other stuff that Milchick does during that? But the biggest piece of evidence, I think, is when he wakes up Dylan at Dylan's house. Somebody is turning the switches back at Lumon.
Mm-hmm.
He's physically in the room with Dylan and he's on the walkie or the phone saying, kill it, right? And we see a hand turn the dials off. Now we know somebody has to physically turn the dials at Lumon to wake up people outside. This is what Dylan does in the finale for a long time. Who is doing that? If Milchick is the only one working there, who is the other person? And how come we've never seen another employee? And it just seems suspicious. I mean, if you list all of his tasks, it's incredible. There's also some other stuff where like, and this is something I noticed, he seems to have different personalities. Like there's like a friendly Milchick, a very stern, like, and there's also the one where after that, when Dylan bites him, right? During the music dance experience, one of the greatest scenes of all time in anything.
Oh yeah, of course.
Milchick seems confused as to why Dylan's mad at him at all and biting him. And that's the one scene where we see him wearing that white shirt. Usually he's in a short sleeve shirt, right?
Yeah.
Why have him in a long sleeve shirt for the bite scene, and then when we never see anything there, right? And he never acknowledges it later or anything like that. So he's confused in the moment. He's confused. I think this is one of the best theories to come out of season one, the multiple Seth Milchick theory. And that gets back into, look, it could be as simple as twins, triplets, right?
Right.
But consider we have a room full of identical goats. We're asking questions about, Miss Casey and what's going on with her. And we're wondering about the Egans. Cloning is definitely a question here. Shared consciousness is definitely, like, hey, maybe we want to see if we could create multiple versions of someone and they all share one brain in some variation. I don't know what's going on with Seth Milchick, but I think there are things that are easy to not even consider. So I'm glad that this is out there.
So I will say that Doug Grainer did a lot of stuff. Who's the head of security, and in the security office is where the switches are for the.
But he's dead by then.
He's not dead by then.
Grainer's not dead by then.
Grainer dies in the next episode after the closet stuff. He dies in the beginning of the music experience, but Dr. Ragabi kills Grainer at the beginning of the music dance experience episode, which is after Dylan woke up outside.
Why not show him? Right?
Good question. Well,
why
it's so that here's what I think. It's so that they can go into the office after Mark has the card and see all that stuff. Like, if we saw that already, there's no revelation for us. Do you know what I mean? That's what I think. The show is really good at making sure the characters know the character and the audience know equal amounts of stuff. It's just not always the same stuff.
Mhm.
And I think that was an example of like the revelation of the characters learning this is better for us if we learn it at the same time as them. I don't know if that's true. I could just be reading into that, but the logistics of the episode, Grainer's still alive and is probably the one switching the switches.
I'm going to go back and look at those hands because we see the hand. We do see the hand.
Okay.
And can I just say before we move on from Seth Milchek, because
Yeah.
we've talked about this, Trammell Tillman
Tremel, yeah, he's
Yeah.
so good. He's
Is-
so good.
it's one of like subtly the best performances I've ever seen. He is incredible and he's asked to do so much, and a lot of it is very nuanced and just like slight changes of expression, or even the way he's holding himself, like the tension in his body is
Mhm.
conveying so much, like, and it's basically every scene with him he's great, like every scene. But like if you really want to see what I'm talking about, go back and watch Bert's retirement.
Yeah.
Like what he's conveying there so often with nothing but just the way his neck just tenses
Mhm.
up and his shoulders, and he's holding in all of this anger. And I'm very interested to learn more about him. And I wonder if in season 2, if we might finally start to get some answers about these people who are non-severed and entrusted with these very important jobs. Milchek has got a very, very important job. He's the
Yeah.
contact for the Audis.
Yeah.
Like that's the other thing. Like, go list Seth Milchek's job responsibilities. You'd be like, so what's he work? 180 hours a week?
He's never not working. He goes outside, he goes and does all this stuff. And also, like, how does he realize all this stuff? I know there's like stuff built into the elevators that, like, when Helly tries to smuggle out messages, like it flags it in the elevator. But then how did the elevator not realize that Dylan had the card from O&D? Like there's that kind of thing.
But how did it know he didn't, right? Because he leaves it behind. It's in the restroom at work. But if he took it, I think Helly's right. That's a load of crock. Like that's just there's it's a lie. There's no thing about messages. It's that they're being watched all day.
Yes.
So that, but like Milchek is like, where is it? Did you take it with you? He's like, no, I left it at the office. So if he had taken it out, they would have known it. The elevator would have stopped, which indicates that doesn't actually work. The other thing too is, why was that card so important?
Yeah. It's literally just it was like
It's one picture of like somebody, like, what is it doing, like a karate chop or something like that?
something like that. Yeah, it's
like
like
a little combat photo of like,
and it's drawn like
airplane
airplane
yeah.
instructions.
Yeah.
But it's literally just no one is supposed to know what anybody else does, like other than just like general. That's why the names of the departments mean nothing. Optics and design. What exactly is that? We just know, like, Bert and Irv were not actually supposed to meet. They're really never supposed to interact other than just maybe passing in the hallway, like we see that one when they're going to the perpetuity wing and they pass Bert and his coworker. And they wouldn't have stopped for more than a second had Bert and Irv not already spoken to each other. Also, like, what is the entire point of, getting back to Miss Casey for a second, the wellness center? There's an entrance door and an exit door, and it's literally one room. Like, there is no reason for it not to be the same door. It's just for making sure people are following the rules. That's what I think it is. It's like, what is the whole point of, because you see Miss Casey in the room and there's just two doors behind her. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Try not to show any favor to any one fact. Like,
so funny.
Yeah. I don't remember what we were talking about to get onto that. Oh, Milchek. Yeah. So I feel like he is always, and there might be a Milchek who is outside. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, there could be. What would be the plural? With just Milcheks? I guess we can't do
Milcheks,
anything
yeah.
fun.
No, unfortunately, there's nothing linguistic that we can apply to that.
Yeah, it's just he's everywhere. He's everywhere, and it'd be one thing if he was everywhere and he just kind of like never had a job that required his attention for more than 2 minutes. But we literally see him have a job that keeps him in a little office for a day and a half. It's just like, what if something else happened?
Mm-hmm.
It's just strange that
he also sits outside Cobell's office. Like,
yes.
so like, How is he doing all this?
Some people think that that's literally just one Milchek.
Right.
That's in his, like, sits in that office, and then um it's great. The fact that we can even ask this question and it
Yeah.
could be a legitimate, like, oh yeah, we're gonna find out there's 5 of him and it's connected to the goats, like, is
Yeah.
amazing. Like, and it won't feel. I am willing to go anywhere with the show because everything feels earned. Nothing
Mhm.
feels made up. It feels meticulously planned. It feels like it's all going to make sense no matter how wild it is. And that's the best.
Yeah. It's we haven't even mentioned him, but the Dan Erickson is the creator of it, and he apparently has this enormous like show Bible. Which he'd have to in
Yeah.
order to keep all of this straight.
And I hope when the show ends that he publishes it.
God, that'd be
He's
so
gonna read
great.
the whole thing.
It could just be called the Book of Kier.
Oh, yeah.
Wouldn't that be
By the
awesome?
way, although what if you start reading the book of Kier and you're like, because every once in a while there's a Kier quote and you're like, all right, yeah, that's good. That's good. Like, a lot of them are slightly off to the point that they're greatly disturbing, but every once in a while there's like a Kier quote. It's like, yeah, okay, that's not bad.
Yeah. It's very funny. I like all of it. Like when we see, the perpetuity wing is another like amazing section. Like when we go there, and obviously they go back for the waffle party. Dear God, the waffle party. But there is an entire replica, or maybe it's just the house of Kier's house. It's his
replica.
It's an exact replica size, and it doesn't not look like the Psycho house. It's just there. It looks like there's a skylight, but we know it's well underground.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting. So there's that part of it. There's also the whole section, which is just a room full of rotating images on screens of people smiling, which is meant to represent all the people who Lumon has made happy or helped over the years, which is nothing. It means nothing. And then there's the hall of austerity or whatever, where it's just like it's like the hall of presidents, but the mannequins look terrible. They're really scary looking.
Can I just say though how much I appreciated how perfectly they each match the clothing? like the 80s CEO looked like the most 80s CEO ever. I just got a big kick out of that. It was although I will say, if you go back and look, Kier Egan's statue, there are some inconsistencies.
Sure.
With the way he's presented. Now I realize, like, he lives I think his however long he's alive. I think he is born in 1841, he dies in 1939, right? So he's very old. So he obviously had a lot of different eras of clothes and it changed greatly, but I don't know, for something where we're supposed to be revering him and seen as this, religious figure and stuff. It's interesting how often he is depicted very differently, including his statue makes him look like Andy Samberg.
Yeah, it, and like the in episode 2 we see who we realize is Helena Egan, but Milchek showing her to the severed floor and the severing like
the surgery
procedure room, which is on a higher floor. Again, that's another Milchek. He's in the room the whole time. Like, what else? Is he just not around at work the rest of the time? Anyway, but there's that huge, like, kind of, I think it's called a bas relief of Kier's face on the side of like a big giant pillar. That doesn't really look like what he looks like elsewhere either.
No, it doesn't. It just doesn't.
It's a bearded guy, so we're just assuming that that's always Kier anytime you see a bearded guy. But like his beard is often longer, his hair is different lengths, and
compare that to the statue and compare it to the painting that Cobell has in her house.
Right.
None of them look the same.
Right.
And there is a theory that that every CEO is Kier.
Right.
That there's like, so that might be a hint, if that's true, that the fact that he never quite looks the same is a hint that he's always a different person.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of been around this whole time. I'm not sure what to do exactly with the different appearances, but I think it's very, very revealing of something that we're going to find out.
Oh, it's something. All right. And it's also sort of like, it kind of brings into question, because we know that Helena, whatever, however she pronounces it on the outside, is the next in line,
Mhm.
of the succession, but she isn't literally Kier, and there have been women CEOs before. So again, I think it's brain manipulation in that sense. And they're
Her father James does say, the grandfather would cherish what you've done,
mm,
which, if we take the few things James says as being very revealing, and I think they are, like the fact that he says, I cried in my bed when they told me what she tried to do to you. What a strange thing to say. I cried in my bed. Why mention you're in your bed? He
yeah,
looks pretty healthy here, but that
right.
indicates like he's not. So maybe they did something. Are we back to bodies and shared
Hmm.
consciousness and being able to put, because if we are, if like there's the James Egan body that's decrepit and sitting in bed, and there's the James Egan body where he can get up and go to this event.
Hmm.
Maybe it is possible that Kier Egan's consciousness is being moved about. Maybe the person who says yes on the intercom from the board is Kier Egan.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
to me, that's the most logical. Like that
And
insane, that insane thought that that's Kier Egan saying yes is to me the most logical answer.
yeah, we only ever hear from one person. There's what's her name? I can't remember her name. Who is the representative of the board? Um, who has the earpiece in at all times? And even like just constantly, the board is always there, but never contributes anything except for, again, that one word. I think it's like it's very possible there is no board. It's just Kier,
Mhm.
or it could be the Council of Kiers. Do you know what I mean? Like King the Conqueror. There's a million of him. Um, why would you need a board? Nobody knows what they do. Like the board implies like some sort of outside kind of oversight.
Yeah, and
Um,
it seems impossible the Egan family would give any of that up.
absolutely,
Yep.
absolutely.
But there's never that many Egans.
Mm-mm.
Like it seems to me like James has one child.
Right.
We never hear anything, or I mean, it's certainly possible there are more, but yeah, it just doesn't seem likely that the Egan family would give up control of their company. And if they had a board can remove a CEO.
Right.
Now, obviously, it's a cult. It's a religious thing.
Sure.
They could just be the most loyal members, but we see with someone I think we got to come back to. We see with Cobell, like even the most loyal people can act of their own volition and
Right.
do things that the company doesn't want.
She does
So
things in Kier's name, not in Lumen's name, quite often.
yes. So I want to go back. You said, why does she want to see if Mark
Right.
will recognize his wife? Well, she does talk about her husband dying.
Mm-hmm.
And there is some we can't trust anything she says, but we can certainly make some judgments, and she does seem sincere when she talks about her late husband.
Right.
But she also lies about her mom. My mom was an atheist, my mom was a Catholic, so we can't trust, but it does seem like her husband died,
Mm-hmm.
and now she wants to see if severed Mark can recognize his dead wife. Is her husband out there severed?
Yeah.
That's got to, right? Like, I mean, that's the most logical question for us to ask, is the most reasonable. If she's so concerned with Mark, okay, so let's say, yeah, right? She has this hope that her severed husband is going to recognize her. Well, whose portrait is she coming home and sitting in front of and getting emotional to every night?
Right.
Kier Egan. Uh, Now we start getting into this is where like we're already making a bunch of like if this, so the
Right.
further
Yeah.
out we
Yeah.
get. But if we're going to raise the possibility that Kier Egan still is alive in some capacity or has been alive in some capacity, CEOs are just here, right? Maybe
Mm-hmm.
they're severed, right? Are we sure James Egan isn't severed, and that the
No.
other side of him isn't Kier Egan? That they split a body? Like if Mr. Burns, instead of putting his whole head on Homer's body, could have just put his brain in Homer's body and
Yeah.
shared it, right? Is Cobell's dead husband the last incarnation of Kier Egan?
Mm-hmm.
Eh, any other series, I'd be like, this is either all ridiculous, these are the silliest theories I've ever heard, or this is the silliest show. On Severance, it all makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. I also have like a weird kind of sense that, okay, so when we see her in her own house worshiping at that thing, and she's in her Mrs. Selvig guise, and it could just be I'm home, I have to look like this. We also don't ever see her. So she clearly like puts on the I'm the the manager, Mrs. Cobell, or Harmony Cobell look when she gets to work. But my kind of thought is, what if that's the fake? What if that's the mask? Like, what if Mrs. Selvig is really her? And she's weird and stuff, and is working kind of her own angles and everything like that. And when she's at the office, she puts on this like sort of management face.
Not only do I love that, I think you're right. And I think there's a very important scene with her that can be easy to miss. She is looking out her window. So from the point of view, she's by herself.
Mhm.
She doesn't know there's an audience watching her. There's no one for her to perform for. And she sees Mark outside and she says, "Oh, poor Mark." Like, it's a very like genuine moment of like
Yeah.
just like compassion for him. Why?
Yeah.
Like here you are you're working for this company. You might not think it's evil, but it's not totally ethical, right? And
Right.
because his dead wife's there, right?
Right.
So it's not totally ethical, even if you believe in it. Where's this compassion coming from? Why any compassion? What does she see in Mark? That is true in her, which gets back to this whole dead husband, right? Dead spouse. And the fact that she, even after she's fired, is still trying to protect Lumon, while at the same time she spends the whole season operating outside of Lumon. Or she wants to bring this information to the board once she has it rock solid, as though she wants to endear herself to the board. Why is that important? How are you not already valued, considering you run the severed floor?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's question, why is she getting involved with Mark's sister at all? Where's the
Yeah.
limit? Like, why do that? Isn't it
Yeah. Why
enough
is
to
she
just sort of,
insinuating herself in his life like that?
yeah, put him in the wellness room with Miss Casey is one thing, right?
Right.
Why are you becoming a part of his sister and brother-in-law's
And we do
life?
know that he has, at least on some level, and it's the subconscious, it's the dream level or whatever. He does have some acknowledge or some ability. His innie has some ability to kind of like extrapolate stuff from outside, and by that I mean like he goes and visits that tree, and then when he's in a wellness check, he is out of clay building the same tree,
Yeah.
which he shouldn't by rights know anything about. He's never seen a tree that's not inside Lumon. So like it's an interesting sort of there is something about the dreams that is like what they can't quite get the operation right, because or
And don't forget, when Petey leaves, he's like, we have no, like, Milchek's like, why didn't you get upset when Catherine D left? It's like, well, you told us she was leaving. We don't know what happened to Petey. Maybe he died. And Mark gets really emotional
yeah,
because he's got that grief hidden deep down there that is, it's like, it's not a folder he can pull up,
right.
but it is a file that is like contributing to the overall operating system. Sorry, computer people, if I definitely mangled that analogy. You get it.
Sure.
You get
No,
what
I
I'm
get
saying.
it. Yeah. Well,
Like,
and
there's an
it,
ingredient and
yeah,
in the recipe he doesn't know is in the recipe, but it's
he,
there nonetheless.
yeah, he acknowledge. So any Mark sort of acknowledges that he knows that his Audi is sad about something. Like he goes, I think I was crying. Like, and he finds the tissue in his pocket in the first episode and everything like that. And yet he kind of just like goes through life and stuff like that. And that's obviously not the way you deal with grief. Like this whole thing, if that's the reason he decided to do this, like, and we don't know Dylan's reason for it. We don't know Irv's reason
Yes.
for it. We only know Mark's reason for it and Helly's reason for it. We don't know Bert's we don't know why anyone would voluntarily want to do this who didn't have a reason that kind of or profound, either sad or like pragmatic for your family,
Oh, yeah,
line or whatever.
the senator's wife has the most.
Oh, that's
Ugh.
so bad.
Ugh, lady, please.
I in I was almost going to leave that out of the video just because it was sort of like, this doesn't, I mean, it's sort of a side tangent kind of thing. Like I left a lot of the stuff about like Alexa, the midwife that Mark dates. I left a lot of that out because it's not 100% important, but I was like, no, I think the senator's wife stuff is actually like fairly important because it kind of shows like it can be a thing for the rich to just do.
Yeah.
Um,
I think it's more thematic, but it definitely also contributes to the idea of like, oh, they don't want Severance to be a work thing. They want Severance to be a life thing.
Yeah.
Like, but yeah, I don't think her story necessarily specifically.
yeah, it's not
I
like a
think,
hugely important thing.
but yeah,
Also, but
upsetting though.
yeah, but the fact that Devin tells Mrs. Selvig that, it's sort of like, okay, so she's at least on to what's going on. Devin's low key one of my favorite characters on the show. She doesn't have a ton to do, but I love her relationship with Mark. Like as messed up as he is, when it's just the two of them together, they react the way that I think is a very believable adult siblings
Yes,
interactions. I love it
absolutely.
so much. And then when he in the last episode, when he is in Mark and he's talking, he goes and tells her all this stuff. There's something so cathartic in me, or there's something I feel very cathartic when I see that kind of thing happen. This person is telling this person, finally, these people are on the same page about stuff. I love that kind of stuff in fiction. And she believes him.
It was probably helped too that they delayed it like 4 times.
Oh
it's like, just hurry up.
Yeah.
Like, Irv, get in the car, call somebody, write a note to yourself. All 3 of them. Like, I'm just like,
yeah, I know.
All 3 of them. You don't have no idea if this is going to last 60 seconds. Write a note.
Yeah. I know. That is like, Irv is the one where you're like, okay, Irv should know better. Like, I know he kind of figures some stuff out, but like Helly wakes up at a gala event. Like she has very backfooted when she wakes up. And the fact that Mark wakes up hugging Harmony Cobell is sort of like, oh geez, what am I doing? Like, and also like in some of the stuff that we've seen, like they still refer to their other selves as like my Audi's sister, not my sister, like that kind of thing. I think is really interesting. I went off track entirely, but I love their relationship. It's good stuff. Okay, so we talked about the board, we talked about revolving. I guess we did talk about, and we talked about the goats. Cobell is really.
I have my big one that I think
let's
explains a lot. So we know from the trailers only. Again, I promise neither of us have watched any of season 2. We know from the trailers they are going to go back to Lumon.
Mm-hmm.
The innies are going back. How? Why? How are they able to do any of this? Right? If they're being watched at all times,
yeah.
And we know Lumon is got his fingers in everywhere. How did anything happen? Right? How are they able to pull off any of this?
Yeah.
If they are so tightly regulated, they are literally underground in the basement, right? This is a company that has a dead woman working with her husband, right? Like this is all. And I have kind of settled on what I call the Matrix architect theory, which is the innies are not doing anything without someone wanting them to do it.
Mm.
Now, there is, I think, a possibility that there is a mole on the inside, but more likely, I think that what we are seeing is people who are doing mysterious and important work that are also part of a larger experiment.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's very reasonable.
So somebody with power, who we would, if we had to list the top candidate, it would be Kier Egan, right? Or whoever's in charge of the board, or whoever said yes. I think whoever said yes is the architect who is letting Neo get away with all of this because it's serving a bigger purpose for them. Because otherwise, why would they let Jane Egan's daughter go back to work to the place where she just tried to kill herself?
Right.
Why would they let any of these people? Why would they say, oh, you guys are news stars or anything like that? These people figured out how to break out.
Yeah.
Right? They broke out of the severed floor. They got into their real lives. They talked to people. They revealed the truth about what's going on there. And now we know they're going to go back to work. As I was watching season 1, I was like, I don't even know how any of this is possible. Now, they do try to explain it, right? We see that there's nobody actually in the monitoring room, but
Mhm.
we also see Miss Cobell has cameras everywhere she can watch from her computer.
Right.
Do we think that those cameras aren't recording? That it's not being filed somewhere? Do we really think that this mega corporation that's created this ri- like awful technology doesn't have a way to monitor their employees, that they really are going to get caught off guard by Dylan
Yeah.
breaking into this, you could trick Milchek and Cobell. So they're just two people. I don't think you can beat the system, which
No,
tells me the system wants them to do this.
and I think that also stands true for someone is letting Cobell do this stuff. Like whatever she's doing, because you would think, well, they didn't know that Helly tried to kill herself. Um, and until suddenly, like, they do, and they have pictures. Like, who sent them the pictures? How did they get the pictures? Like, there's a number of questions in that respect where it's like somebody wanted Cobell to not be there for this specific period of time, or maybe they were just tired of her doing whatever she was doing. Maybe she crossed a line, something like that. Who knows? But I do think that there is somebody yet further up who is also monitoring even the management. Like, there's got to be, like, it's a big facility. We only really see the foyer outside that Mark has to, wave at the lady before he can go inside. That and then the elevator to the severed floor and the severed floor. That's like all we ever see. But we know it's an enormous facility. So what else is going on? There's got to be, like, further up you go, there has to be more people watching stuff. And I think that, like, I think the board is obviously the ultimate one, but I do think there must be, like, offshoot, like, lower higher management people.
There are also part-time employees, right? Like somebody's wearing that mask at the waffle party, right? There are four people whose job it
Right?
is to show up as the Four Tempers and
Yep.
have sexy fun time with Dylan. So why isn't there an entire floor of security,
Right.
right? They either don't need it or there is. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Either answer gives the same result, which is somebody is paying attention.
Yeah.
And somebody is either okay with this happening or manipulating it so it does happen.
Yeah.
And I don't think finding out that they've been allowed to do this will be disappointing. I think it will make the story more exciting because eventually they, will break out of that.
Yeah.
Plus,
I
plus, if you watch season 1, you might think like, oh, this is just going to be a one season show.
mhm.
How long can they keep this going? They can keep it going if somebody is doing something that they're not even aware. They're just pawns still.
Yeah. Um this is sort of neither here nor there, but one of my favorite line readings. Everyone's great in this. Like, it's great actors doing great stuff. I love Zach Cherry, like, just generally throwing away uh lots of sweary lines. Like, he just kind of says them, and it's like the best line reading. But I'm obviously not going to say those because they're swears. And this is a family show, as we mentioned earlier. But one of my favorites is when Mark goes up to see Cobell, and she's just like, after they've made quota, and she's just like, "Are you trying to give me a heart attack?" All that stuff. She's really good in that. And then she goes, "Well, who's going to get the waffle party?" And he goes, "I think Dylan should have it." And she goes, it can be you or anybody but Dylan." It's my favorite joke, because it's just like, Dylan, really? Like, no one likes Dylan. And that makes me laugh.
It's funny too because like we barely talked about Dylan. We haven't talked about Zach Cherry at all, and he's just fascinating at all times.
Yeah.
Like he's just so funny. He also is like
His way with words is like, it's obviously very crass, and he swears all the time, but he also says stuff like, O&D is duplicitous 201. It's like, who
it,
says stuff like that?
but he says like I'm very smart, right? And
Yeah.
he is very smart. And uh, as we like you said, we probably know the least about him. We know he has kids. We don't know why he's here. We don't know
Yeah.
why would someone with 3 kids not want to think about their kids 8 hours a day.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
like it's because he doesn't seem like a bad person. He's just a little vulgar.
And then when he finds out he does have a kid, all he wants to know is the kid's name, and that's too much, and
Yeah.
that's what drives him over the deep end. So clearly he's very passionate in that way. It's like, that's another guy who, like, at the beginning, like, he's like, shut up and do this because I'm going to get perks. That's all he cares about. He doesn't actually care about the rules. It's implied that he and everyone has gone to the break room at one point or another. when he tells Helly, it's like, yeah, it's fine. You know, like you go and I always just think about something I am sorry about. It's like,
He's
okay,
so
well,
good.
let's,
It's only a lie if you think it is,
yeah,
or it's not. What is it, George Costanza? Right? It's not a lie if you don't. But yeah,
it's
he's
not a lie
great.
if you believe it.
Yeah, he's not a lie if you believe it. Um, I mean, look, there's some other stuff that's like we need. Like I mentioned, we don't actually know why Doctor Ragabi,
Mhm.
reintegrated Peter, but we can kind of guess at that. I'm sure there's more going on with her. Um, there's it's you could ask 500 questions from season
Yeah.
1 and still have like another 500 to go. It's really great, and and I was thinking about this last night because I knew we were going to do this pod. If you took out the reason that I think that this show is like top tier, like as good as TV can kind of get, especially this kind of genre, sci-fi dystopian, sci-fi horror, is that if you took all that stuff away, if you just if the only thing going on here was somebody figured out how to make people severed and it was just a workplace thing, this would still be a great show because it
Yeah.
has so much to say about corporations and how they treat us and how there's the greatest horror of this show is not being severed. It's existing in such a capacity that you never leave work,
Yep.
that you are only there to work, you only exist to work, that you literally close your eyes, open them, and you never left the office. And we like our job. We are right
Yeah.
now. We are
Luckily.
right now working while we talk about a TV show that we would talk about anyway off
Yeah.
of
This
work.
is on
And,
work hours, everyone.
like we're
Yeah.
working. We're lucky that we're. Right. But this. There are still days where you log in and you're like, "Well, I just was here.
Yeah.
I was here 5 seconds ago. Like or like." You look at the clock at night, it's 11 p.m. You're like, where did the day go? I just got to get up and start over again. And it really captures that. It's there's a lot of institutions. Maybe we shouldn't even specifically get into them. Just corporations and religions. I think the show takes on.
Oh yeah. It's very pointed.
So it's the human stuff is there. The themes for the world as the way it is, those are all there.
Mhm.
And then you also have this incredible mystery, which is just crafted beautifully. It's really hard to do, mystery boxes, and there's so
Yeah.
many here, and yet it all works so well. It's I haven't, like I said, I haven't really had I don't think the last 5 to 6 years have really been like my favorite TV era,
Sure.
especially considering we went through the golden age of all these shows and stuff. But this one absolutely works for me, and I can't wait. Once we're done with this, I get to start
I
season
know.
2.
You lucky boy. Yeah, I think that's especially on like revisiting. It was always there, but like the part that really kind of came to the forefront amid all the mysteries and all the weird stuff and just like the great acting and great cinematography, all of the great stuff about the show is like the central horror is both like to be severed in that way. You are either always working or you are effectively, especially in Mark's case, devoid of purpose, because so much of what the American society is you work to live and you live to work, and you can't do anything else about it. Whether you like your job or you don't, you have to work, and it is the thing that unites everybody. But all Mark does, like, so he severed himself so that he says he could have 8 hours a day where he's not thinking about Gemma and being sad. But actually what he did is he makes it so his entire life is just being sad. He has nothing to take his mind off of it. He sits in the dark and drinks all the time because all he is sad. And that is really upsetting. Like, if you take away somebody's livelihood or somebody's like, this is what I do with my life, this is my career. That's why people that really get into it. That's why people aren't retiring. People are working well into their 70s and 80s because they don't know what else to do. They don't know what retirement looks like.
Well, you say that reminds me of one of my favorite Flight of the Conchords songs, Inner City Pressure. Where it's when you're unemployed, there's no vacation, right?
Yep.
But seriously, you're like Mark, because Mark is not processing his grief at all. If he's not actually dealing with it,
Right.
he's just giving himself a break. 8 hours a day from even thinking about it. He's never getting better. And because he can't get better, he can't actually find a purpose.
Right.
And it's just self-defeating. It defeats the whole purpose. And meanwhile, he's not happy at work, right? He as soon as his best friend leaves, it all falls apart for him because that's the little world that any Mark has, and
Yeah.
he has no way of even processing that. I do want to mention though, I you know how we all just kind of have actors that like aren't super famous but we love.
Yeah.
Yul
Neil
Vasquez is
Vasquez is
one.
so good in this.
I,
Yeah.
every time he pops up on anything, I'm like, yeah, here we go. I know, we're getting a good performance. Um, he has what I think is sneakily the most devastating line of the season.
Mm.
He tells Mark's like, what are we friends at work or something? And he goes, I'm your best friend. You're my very good friend. And it just kind of like that line
Yeah.
crushed me. It's like, oh man, like it's such a human
Because
little
then it's like,
moment. It's
who's
so
Petey's
honest.
best friend?
It's just like I matter a little bit more to you than you do to
Yeah.
me. And it's like so honest, but it's like he's not really hurting him because Audi Mark doesn't know any
Yeah.
of this. But it's just the fact that it's like it, because the people this severed floor have such a weird relationship, but they still have relationships and they
Yeah.
are still people.
Yeah.
That's why the end of episode 4 where Helly you know goes to the elevator is so devastating because she's still a person.
Yeah.
And then there's also I know we're talking more theories and stuff. There's the thing about the revelation about her and who she is it really gets into the whole nature versus nurture, which
Sure.
is always going to be a fascinating topic and if done well. And here she is when she is free of her family's teachings and influence. She is a good person.
Yep.
And when she is the person she was raised to be, she's a monster.
Well, and it also sort of like, because we see that horrible video where she says, I'm going to tell you this hard truths or whatever she says, like, I'm a person, you are not.
You are
That
not.
also, then when you extrapolate it outward, it's like, that's what the Egans think of their employees, that they're not people. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. She went from thinking she had 10,000 brothers and sisters to you're not a person.
yeah, it's wild.
And
It is
that's what I mean. Like
yeah,
it's just a great show about work
yeah,
and modern work. I should say modern work. And this is very much a commentary on American ideas about work,
yeah,
about existence, about
yes,
life. I'm sure there are other countries that also are seeing a reflection of themselves, but I just in terms of this is, I was telling you as an American, this is very much a show about work in America.
yes, 100%. All right. Well, we should wrap it up. Obviously, this show has a lot going on. There are 10 episodes in season 2, which means we'll have one extra week of stuff to talk about.
You got any predictions?
Do I have any predictions? I kind of don't want to predict anything.
Yeah.
I kind of want to just go with the flow. I want to go, because often when people predict things, not necessarily you or I, but just in general, if it doesn't happen that way, people can go, oh, because that's like, that wasn't what I thought it was going to happen. I kind of don't want to think about what might happen. I want to think that there are implications. I want to know what the immediate thing is. I want to know what happens now that Devin knows that Gemma's alive. Like, I want to know what that is going to look like, but I don't have any like idea of what that will look like. And I have faith in the show that it's not going to be as cut and dry as what I would think it was going to be.
Well, I am very confident that there are going to be some fantastic curveballs.
Yeah.
That things that I planted flags in today, those flags will be coming out. I think some will stay planted in through season's end, but I'm just as much looking forward to see what I'm way off on. I'm actually more excited for what I'm way off on than any sort of vindication, and it's you're right. Like sometimes the theories, and I think
we
we
do
know
it so much. That's part of our job. Is
no,
to
yeah,
sort of,
but you know what? There's a difference between like the prevalence of theories in and how we engage with them. I think the show that really made internet theories explode. I know the X-Files was like the original, but like that was much more small. There was a smaller audience, so I think we all
Yep.
know what show really. That show totally dropped the ball, and it wasn't even that it didn't deliver on the theories, that it just forgot about doing anything.
Yeah.
I have complete faith in this show. And what we're really just doing is we're being engaged viewers. Like
Yes.
if you're watching the show and not at least thinking about what something could mean, you're actually missing out on a lot because the show is inviting you to engage with it that way. And that's what good art does.
And it also like Dan Erickson having a big, huge, giant series Bible means that he has an end in mind. And I think that that's like, that is always something that's like, when anybody goes, well, this show could go on forever. It's like, that's not a good show. Like, you can do it with procedurals, I guess. But like the
you
fact
could be
that
Law and Order if you want, but you can't.
Yeah, sure.
Severance cannot be Law and Order.
Severance can't be Law and Order, and it shouldn't. And I think, we'll see what happens this season. But it's like any show of this kind of high concept that's more than like, I'll say if it even hits the 5th season, it's maybe gone on too far. But I think 3 seasons would be good. I will say, here's my prediction: we will learn something about the goats.
Okay,
that's my prediction. I don't know when, but we will learn something more about the goats.
For everyone who's listening, if we see 2 Seth Milchiks on screen, just know,
incredible.
Just know how happy I am.
Yeah,
just know. That's the one I think if I could just will one into existence.
Yeah.
I just want to see like a room of Milchiks talking about their day. Just take 5 minutes, be like, yeah, I had her apologize 15,000 times. You think you had it tough? I got bit by a guy.
He bit me because you were in that room over there doing this. Like, yeah.
What do you mean you woke him up?
Oh boy. Speaking of waking up, why don't you wake up and listen to our back episodes? I don't know what I'm talking about. But yeah, so again, what I'm gonna cut this part out. I can do it if I want to. Cut this part out when I'm talking about it.
Well, you can't sing the Beach Boys.
That definitely true. Thanks everybody for listening. Mikey, how can people get a hold of you and your fabulous work on the internet should they choose to do so?
Greatly cut back on social media, but if you want to send me a message,
what happened? Just kidding.
If you want to send me a message about the show or anything else, Burger Mike at Blue Sky is probably the best way. I might not respond immediately, but I will see it. Send me a message or just tag me or something. Otherwise, you can find me. I think you know what it is. The greatest website anybody created. And I'm saying this both as the outie me and the innie me, Nerdist.com.
You can find more of our mysterious and important work at Nerdist.com, of which there is plenty. You can follow me on Blue Sky, Kyle D. Anderson. You can also follow me on Letterboxd, Kyle_Anderson. Thank you very much for listening. Join me again next week on Laser Focus when my guest will be a different person. Bye-bye. Laser Focus is a production of Nerdist Industries and Legendary Digital Networks. It was produced, edited, and hosted by me, Kyle Anderson. For more, visit Nerdist.com.